Hello everyone, Stephen again. Today we're going to be talking about the natural inclinations that each human has. This is from the shoninki. In the shoninki, it says delight, anger, sorrow, pleasure, love, evil, and greed. Essentially saying that people naturally have these in their mind, right? Kind of like in modern day terms, you could say like multiple intelligences theory. Something along that line. Like within a person, there's a person, not a single emotion or a single stream, so to speak, but it's a combination. It's compounded, right? And then so what Natori says is the above seven emotions: delight, anger, sorrow, pleasure, love, evil, greed. And he compares it with Buddhism, and he says Buddhism has delight, anger, gloom, thinking, sorrow, anger, and fright. And then he says, though, even though this sort of ninjutsu teaching has slightly different words, he goes on to say this is the same concept and is to be treated as one. So again, you see this induction of or infusion of Buddhist concepts within ninjutsu. The idea here is that no one is born without with a complete balance of the seven emotions, all right? And if there's such person, it must be a saint. But when it says saint, what it means here is like a realized being or a great bodhisattva. The idea here is that um, this is actually what's interesting is this is actually not as profound explanation as what you find in the Bansen Chukai. Here he's discussing kind of a more like just Mahayana, even Hinayana Mahayana approach, Sutrayana approach, where the idea is that the individual is viewed as a composition of emotional factors, right? So essentially, he's saying that an average person, these emotional factors are essentially out of skew. Some are greatly expanded, some are diminished, and they're all kinds of crazy, right? And then therefore a person who has all their emotions are like in proper alignment and in proper quantity, etc., 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 that person is a great bodhisattva, a realized being. Now this is interesting though, because in the Bansen Shukai, Fujibayashi Sensei actually discusses a more higher approach, a more sort of like like a Vajrayana approach, right? Where he's saying in the Bensen Jukai, he doesn't discuss human beings in terms of like the emotional composition, but he talks about the original mind and then the human mind, and how all human beings have these sort of a primordial mind, right, the Buddha nature, and then they have their samsaric mind. And then so what he's essentially in the Bensen Jukai, he's essentially Fujibashi Sensei is saying that the shinobi should work to dissolve the samsaric mind, right? And to work to sort of bring about the primordial awareness, or the Buddha nature. Whereas in shoninki, what's being discussed here is actually it's not about becoming enlightened so much as being like a bodhisattva. So Bunsen Chukai is actually talking more about punching through to like being enlightened, whereas this one is talking more about being just a well balanced individual, or like a bodhisattva. Um, this is kind of it's in both infused Buddhist concepts, but Shoninki right here, the Shoninki is actually more of a Sutrayana approach, and Bansen Shukai is talking, or Bansen Shukai is talking more about like a more tantric approach, Vajrayana approach. Um, so what we can conclude here is that both include Buddhism, but the view of the Shoninki at this point is actually, in terms of Buddhism, is actually a lower kind of what we say a lower yana, or a lower explanation, a less skillful explanation than what's in the Bansen Shukai. So this is very interesting, of course, because again, like I said, it shows Buddhism in both, but it shows it's not exactly the same, right? So you can see ninjutsu is based on Buddhism, but it's not based on just like one type of explanation. We have multiple sort of tiers of explanation. Shoninki having a lower tier, Bansen Shukai having a higher tier. So it's something to consider. All right, so essentially developing it further. Now that we've established that it's Buddhism, and that there's multiple tiers of explanation, and Bunsen Jukai has a higher tier, and Shoninki at this point has a lower tier. We proceed forward. It says basically for a normal human being, right? These emotions, the composition of these emotions and their arrangement changes as you grow older and different experiences into your mind stream and your, perceive events, etc. They realign and shift. Okay, you're born with one predominant emotion. This actually has a really complex explanation in Buddhism, and I won't go into it. But you're born kind of with a, with a, like, essentially the continuation from your last life, born into it, right? It says later carve out the other six depending on your will. What it essentially means is based on, they can either align themselves just spontaneously by your life's events, or you can proactively choose, you can proactively align them yourself. Shinobi can use this to their advantage because one's true nature will usually come out and the other six will be set aside in the event of an emergency or urgent action. When all learning is put aside, you see the core of a person. So essentially, for people who are not like serious spiritual practitioners, yogis, monks, whatever, okay, they are just their psyche is a composition of these fundamental sort of emotions, and one of those will usually take precedence, okay, and then the way to know which one takes precedence is to put them under extreme conditions, to put them in a fucked up situation, and you'll see, will delight, anger, sorrow, pleasure, love, evil, or greed, one of those will come out more than all the rest. And once you know which one it is, you peg that person, and then each one of those emotions has its own teaching on how to manipulate that person. So the first thing you have to do is you have to find out what is their predominant emotion. What is the configuration of their psyche? Once you know the configuration of their psyche, right, then you can proceed to manipulate them. Right? That's from the shoninki. Yeah. So in closing, like, one thing that I want to tack on to the end of this is, I know there's a lot of discussion between, is the author of the Bansenjukai and the shoninki the same guy or related, but now let's look for just 1 second at actually the Buddhism involved. The author of the shoninki doesn't really quote anything tantric. Everything he quotes is sutrayana. He also includes a lot of spells and stuff like that. It appears that the author of the shoninki is Buddhist, but a sutrayana Buddhist. Okay? The author of the Bansenjukai, however, he quotes tantric things, right? Marishiten, different sutras, different like tantric related sutras. He doesn't include a whole bunch of like magical spells and stuff. The author of the Bansenjukai is actually a very devout Buddhist. He says something will work just because it's in line with what Buddha said. Okay? So the two authors, in the shoninki, the author kind of has a very devout attitude as well. But again, everything he's saying is like sutrayana. Whereas in the Bansenjukai, there's a lot of like mikyo, right? Tantra, Japanese tantra, quoted and referenced. So the two authors seem to be practicing Dharma on two different levels. Shoninki is like sutrayana, and Bansenjukai is somebody who's involved with mikyo or tantra, right? Okay, so you know what I mean? This is kind of like they're both shinobi, they're both Buddhist, but the tier of Buddhism that they're practicing is very different. So that's something to definitely consider into that argument.